Welcome back to Desert Island Discs. Today I have somebody very special to me in my studio. Who am I here with today?
You're here with Mark Messam, your father. Lovely studio you have here. This is exactly how I would set up a studio if I was going to.
So, Dad, I'm going to put you into a situation where you're on a desert island by yourself and you get to bring 5 songs with you, the Bible, the complete works of William Shakespeare, your own novel, and even one luxury item.
Oh, excellent. Okay. I think I'm ready.
So let's get started. What was the first song you chose and why did you choose it?
Well, you gave me lots to think about when you asked me about 5 songs. I've been listening to music since I was 12, 11. Actually, well, before that, listening to my parents' records. But when I hit about 12 is when I really started to kind of get into my own and like my own music. The first band that I really got into was the Red Hot Chili Peppers. And the first song I picked is a song called Funky Monks off of their 1991 album, Blood Sugar Sex Magic. So in 1991, I turned 12 that year. And that album was very impactful to me as a young man, me and my friends. We were listening to it a lot. We'd been listening to a lot of rap in the late 80s. And the Chili Peppers kind of had a rap style to them, which we thought was kind of cool, but they played instruments, which was even cooler, right? And they had tattoos. And they were young, and they were spunky, and they did crazy things. And Funky Monks, the song itself, talks about basically having fun and being funky, just like the music was funky, but also about being a monk, which is kind of like 2 opposing ideas of being fun and carefree, but also being a serious thinker and a philosopher. So even at 12 years old, I really liked that idea and thought it was really cool. So that song on that album was one of the first songs that jumped out at me when you asked me about 5 songs that I would take with me or that were meaningful to me.
So the Red Hot Chili Peppers had a big influence on you when you were younger. Can you talk a little bit more about how they influenced you, like your more recent life?
So, like I said, right from 12 years old, they've been important to me, and they fast became pretty much my favorite band. We used to read about them. There was no internet back then, so we would get magazines and we would collect pictures and we put them in our lockers at school, and everybody would get the coolest picture out of the latest Rolling Stone magazine. It was awesome to have. So we would, listen to them, and then they put out more music. And even when I got into college at the end of the 90s, they were still going strong. And I went to one of their concerts in 2002, and that was really like one of the coolest things I had ever done, because I'd seen a lot of bands, but I'd never seen a band that was really super important to me in that way. So, and these guys, they had their troubles, and there was, like any rock and roll band, they were into drugs and things like that, and girls and lots of exciting things when you're a young person. But one thing that I always really respected about them is that they always kept the music first, and their music, they never really compromised on their musical output as far as quality, and they always tried to do the right thing for music, even though they may have been struggling personally, but that just also meant to me that they struggle just like everybody else, right? So if they're having troubles, well, if I have troubles, then it's okay, because even some of my heroes had troubles. And having said that, some of their music gets you through the dark times when you're having trouble with girlfriends or friends. They have a lot of songs in a huge library that they'd have a song for me. They had a song for almost any situation. And it was, they were very, very important to me growing up, and still are, to the point where your uncle and I got Red Hot Chili Pepper tattoos the week I got married to your mother, right? Because he's a big fan too. And, that was something that we've kind of bonded over the last 30-some years that I've known your uncle. So that was one way we bonded, was through music and through that band.
Okay, so let's talk about your second choice of music.
All right, so this brings me to another band that was super important to me in the 90s. And they came from the same place as the Chili Peppers. They came from Southern California, and they started in the 80s. So they've been around a long time, called Jane's Addiction. And they actually they knew the Chili Peppers. They kind of grew up in the same scene way back in the late 80s, early 90s. And they wrote a song called 3 Days. And that was on an album called Ritual de la Habitual, which came out, I think, in 90 or 91. And it's not a typical Jane's Addiction song. It's a long epic song, and it's kind of a love song, but kind of also about grief and about loss at the same time. And I thought it was just a really deep song that made you feel the feels a little more than the typical rock song did, which they had a lot of great rock songs. But I thought this one was really showcased, one, their musicianship, and two, the depth of their lyrics and depth of the emotions that music could bring out in you, and they were really good at it. And it also, at that time, it coincided with an indie movie that came out in the early 90s that I thought was really cool and edgy, because I was all about anything edgy and different, right? Because everything that we listened to and tried to do with my circle of friends was trying to be rebellious and edgy and not mainstream. Jane's Addiction was not mainstream in the early 90s in the Annapolis Valley of Nova Scotia. Not a lot of people were listening to music like that. So we thought it was really cool and different. And it stood the test of time, because I still think it's one of the greatest songs ever written.
3 days was the morning. My focus 3 days on. My head landed to the sound of cricket balls.
So I'm seeing a little bit of a theme here, which leads me into my next question. If you could only listen to one genre of music for the rest of your life, what would it be?
Well, you'd probably think that I would say early 90s alt rock or alt indie metal. But I don't know if that would really sum up everything that I like to listen to. Alternative music has really definitely formed probably the basis of the music that I listen to, but it also led me to other places like heavy metal, death metal, black metal. Those are things I liked when I was in high school. But I also started to like things a lot softer than that. I liked electronic music. I liked some rap even. Not a lot, but some. So I would say that's the base, but I don't know if I'd want to choose that for the rest of my life or not.
So, moving on to the next disc. What song did you choose and why?
So this one's a little different, so it takes me out of the other genre you were talking about. I picked Alarm Call by Bjork, and that's off an album called Homogenic that came out, I think, in the late 90s, around 97. And 97 was a very pivotal time for me, a time of change. I graduated high school, MRHS, class of 97, and decided, went to university, and I listened to a lot of Bjork. I was starting to listen to different music at that time, getting into college and, starting to expand my tastes a little bit. And which ultimately led to a really cool trip at the end of college where me and my friends went to see a Bjork concert in Montreal and watched her live. And she's an Icelandic singer that does a lot of electronic music, but she was accompanied by a string orchestra on stage, which was a really neat mix of classical music and really upbeat electronic dance, like almost rave music in the late 90s. So I picked that because it's a totally different style that really interests me, but represents a very important time in my life.
I want to go on a mountain top with radio and good batteries, play a giant's tune and free that human race from suffering. I'm no fucking Buddhist, but this is enlightenment.
So, just for curiosity's sake, which song reminds you most of your childhood?
I don't know if it'd be one song or an artist that does, but Huey Lewis and the News. Every time I hear one of Huey's songs, I think about riding in one of my dad's cars, and Dad always had big cars, where even like me and my friends would be in the back seat and we'd use one seatbelt and one big seatbelt and the big old bench seat. Dad had an 8-track player, and I know he had Huey Lewis and the News, and I can remember songs like I Want a New Drug or The Power of Love or Hip to Be Square, And those remind me of being pretty little and always thinking my dad was a pretty cool guy listening to Huey Lewis in the news while he was driving.
So let's move on to your fourth choice.
All right, so we're going back to another band I've already talked about. So it's back to the Red Hot Chili Peppers with a song called Soul to Squeeze. That song reminds me of a little later in high school because I think it came out, I believe that song was on the soundtrack for a movie called Coneheads that had Dan Aykroyd in it. But it was a really popular movie at the time, and that song was a really great song. It had a really funny video about a circus, and a lot of the Chili Peppers were hanging out with like monkeys and circus freaks and different animals. But it was a really soulful song, and it was a mellow song, which, you know, they were a band that had a lot of energy in most of their songs, and this one was a little quieter. And I can remember particularly always wanting it to be played at high school dances, because it meant you might be able to dance with that girl that you wanted to dance with and dance a little slower than normal.
You're so polite indeed. Well, I got everything I need. I'll make my days a breeze and take away my self-destruction. It's bitter, baby, and it's very sweet. Holy roller coaster, but I'm on my feet. Take me to the river, let me on your shore. I'll be coming back, baby, I'll be coming back for more.
So let's go from songs to albums. If you could only listen to songs from one album for the rest of your life, which album would that be?
That's a really tough question. Really tough question. Because there's so many great albums out there. But if I had to listen to one over and over and only songs from that one album and would think that I would hopefully not get bored of it, I think it would be Legends by Bob Marley. Bob has the kind of songs that no matter how many times I hear them, I never get bored of them, and I never change the channel when they come on.
So this is your last choice. What did you choose and why?
So for this one, and I think I picked very similar to my brother-in-law, who's interviewed quite recently on another podcast, I picked Daughter by Pearl Jam. And the reason I picked it, that song means a lot to a lot of us. It was a song that when it came out in 1992, it was on Pearl Jam's follow-up album to their smash hit 10. It was on the album Versus. And we were all very excited for that album to come out because we were all pretty big Pearl Jam fans. And I can remember being at a party where that song got played on repeat probably 700 times. And if anybody tried to touch that radio, they were going to get hurt because everybody wanted to hear that song. But in seriousness, I've always really liked that song and just thought that Eddie sounds very soulful in that song. It's a short song. There's not a huge amount of lyrics, but it's just it really touches you in the heart when you listen to it. And I thought it really represented well what Pearl Jam always tried to do, which was to have meaning in their songs and to evoke emotion.
She holds the hand that holds it down. She will rise Don't call me daughter, not fit to. The picture kept will remind me. Don't call me daughter, not fit to be. The picture kept will remind me.
So I have one final question before we move on from music. What song do you find yourself singing in the shower or singing while doing chores around the house?
One that comes to mind pretty quick because I've known it for a very long time, and now my kids know it, Lilli, is Bust a Move by Young MC. That song came out. Do you know when it came out?
I don't.
It came out in 1989. It might have even been 88. And the first time I heard it, it was on a rap collection album called Rap Tracks 3. And everybody had that cassette, and it had all kinds of hits from different rap artists on it. And that one stuck out quite a bit to me, so much so that I ended up getting the album. I had Young MC's album, which included another song called Principal's Office, which I thought was pretty funny at the time, because it was talking about you getting in trouble at school. But that song has always made me feel pretty upbeat when I hear it, and if I'm in a good mood and I'm doing chores and I just want to sing while I work, then that would probably be the song that would come to mind right away. Because I know that as soon as I hear it on the radio, I have to sing along with it. I really don't have a choice.
So moving on from music, you're allowed to bring the complete works of William Shakespeare, the Bible, and one other novel of your choice. What did you choose?
It's an interesting question. It's just as hard as the music to narrow it down, really, because there's so many good books out there. And it's interesting that you say I already have a copy of the Bible and the complete works of William Shakespeare. I've read most of Shakespeare's work when I was in college because I have a literature degree and I took many courses on Shakespeare, including his sonnets and, of course, his plays, both tragedies and comedies. So that would have been an interesting choice to just take that because there's so much there. And interpretation of those works is so different. You could, probably read them once through and it would take you years and then start over and read them again. And the Bible, of course, has always been open to lots of meaning and interpretation. You could, spend lots of time, philosophizing and reading the books, or reading the different books within the Bible and taking meaning from that. But, however, when it comes to me reading, especially for leisure or for pleasure, I like either something that has to do with science fiction or fantasy, things of that nature. And I used to be huge horror fan too. I used to read a lot of Stephen King when I was younger. But Stephen King, it is one of his books, but it's not one of his horror novels. It's one of his more recent books called Fairy Tale. And the reason I picked Fairy Tale, I've only read it once, but I plan to read it again. It's a very large book. It's probably over 2,000 pages. The reason I picked it is because it is a fairy tale, number one. So it has elements of fantasy and it's kind of an escape from reality. And I imagine if you're on an island all by yourself, you definitely want to escape reality. But it's also a fairy tale that's made up of elements of other fairy tales. So within that story, as you read it, you get to think and imagine about all the other fairy tales you've ever heard in your entire life and how they come together in this wonderful, wonderful novel that he wrote. So not only do you get to enjoy the story that he tells, which is, he's a wonderful storyteller and it's a great story, but you also get to think about other fairy tales and how they fit into his universe. Because every book that Stephen King writes is a universe in and of itself. So I love that this one ties together a lot of elements from typical fairy tales like Aesop and things like that, that a lot of children can relate to. So I think that would be the one that I would bring with, and I think it would complement, the more serious nature of the Bible, and even in the more philosophical or, nature of the more, I guess, intellectual nature of William Shakespeare's writings, because this would be pure escape and pure imagination and pure joy.
Before we end things off, I just have one more question. You were allowed to take one luxury item to the island with you. What did you choose?
So this is another tough question, because luxury items could be lots of things that you might want to take to entertain yourself, like a TV or a computer or a phone with an internet connection. Those could be considered luxury items on an island. But being more realistic about being stuck on a desert island where you cannot communicate and you're not getting rescued and you're stuck, I think the one luxury item I would want, which would help you feel better all the time, would be soap. Because cleanliness is next to godliness, and you would not feel very godly if you were dirty all the time. So I think soap would be the one thing you would need to keep your mind in a happier place, because if you're able to take care of your body, it would go a long way to make you happier all by yourself on that island. So, Lily, that's what my desert island looks and sounds like. What'd you think?
I think it was really, you put a lot of thought into it, and you also pick songs that you resonate with all the way back to when you were just a young child, instead of just songs that you just like them, because people go through phases where they like songs and they don't like songs because they get tired of them. Then there's songs that you've listened to your whole life where you're just I like this song because it has meaning, and it's you just resonate with it in a way.
So do you understand now when you and I like a similar song, how much that might mean to me a little bit? Because that song lots of times predates you and it's something that was important to me before you were even here. And when I see you like a song that I like, I think that's really cool.
Yeah, it is really cool.
Yeah.
Because in a way, we have similar taste, with a lot of the stuff that we do. We're very alike in that way. I think it's very cool.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, me too. But I also like that you have your own tastes.
Yeah.
And that you would pick a completely different set of songs for your desert island. That would be completely different from mine, and you'd have your own reasons. And you probably have your own memories associated with songs that you've been developing over the years, which is really fun to watch. So I'm really glad you're into music as much as you are. Because even though I don't play an instrument, I've always been a fan of music. I want to thank you.
I want to thank you for coming in.
Oh, well, it was my
Talking.
pleasure. It was fun. Enjoyed it. And hopefully we'll talk more music.
Yes, we will.
All right.
Thank you for coming on the show.
You're welcome.